Hi, welcome back to Nick in China. I know it's been a while since my last video. I had a busy few weeks finishing off my university semester, and now I'm free for a couple of months. I've got some great trips actually lined up over the next month or so. I'm not going to tell you where I'm going though, just keep an eye on the channel, it'll be great. Anyway, today, what are we talking about? I want to talk a little bit about kind of the Western perception of China, or certainly how China is being shown in the West, which I think is largely unfavorably and unfairly. Now, I suppose the thing that I've learned this year is over the last couple of years, really, I think there's been a big amp up in the last few years since the trade war, I guess, in kind of anti-China and anti-Chinese government messages coming out from the West. And this year with COVID, obviously that's just been amped up like to a whole new level. Unbelievable. And this is largely, this year I think a lot of it is just discredit this country at all costs. And now they're using it, obviously, and they have been using it for quite a while, to somehow make their own dreadful response to the coronavirus not seem quite as bad. So all of this just non-stop barrage of hatred, if you want to call it that, is obviously it's built up this kind of narrative that a lot of people, not everyone of course, but many people do fall into. And basically the situation is this, as far as I can see: any single positive thing about China that anyone can say or show, even a tiny little bit positive, is just labelled as fake, lies, paid for by the government propaganda. And anything that's negative, however completely ludicrous it is, well, yeah, that must be true then, right? It's got to be true. What are they doing over there in China, you know? This is ridiculous. I mean, it's been weird living here as a Brit throughout, you know, the coronavirus pandemic, because I think obviously I follow a lot of news back home, and I speak to a lot of people back home, and I've been living here, kind of living in two worlds. And man, talk about the West showing its true colours, showing its ugly side this year as far as I'm concerned. So let me give you a few examples of this. There are a few YouTubers obviously based in China, and I think all of them, and I include myself, at some point will have had comments on videos like, "This is paid for by the government, it's all lies." Even on videos that have no connection to, well, anything really. I don't really make controversial videos. This is probably going to be the most controversial video I'll ever make, and it's not going to be that controversial. But you know, I did a video back in November, December, in a park in Xi'an, and just walking around, you know, like, it's kind of showing people what they do in the morning, and everyone's doing Tai Chi and Kung Fu and dancing and all this kind of stuff. And even on that video, you know, there's still some people who comment, "It's all fake, lies." Crazy, eh? The alternative way of looking at that video is it's a bunch of old ladies dancing in a park, but you know, whichever way you want to look at it, I suppose. So on the flip side, this year there's been a number of completely insane stories which have actually been published in newspapers, which is crazy. The first one that springs to mind was obviously the whole bat soup story. I think it was the Daily Mail. It sounds like something they do, that actually printed it. It's where the coronavirus came from. Obviously those pictures were from, well, a different country and years ago, but that doesn't matter. It all just fits into that narrative that somehow China is some barbaric, evil country that eats bats or whatever, you know. There's other stories as well. There was one I also remember that was also printed, and it was there was something like, I think there was like 20 million China mobile SIM cards were cancelled in like the first few months of the year, and therefore that's proof that 20 million people died of COVID and China lied. Obviously anyone with even this much of a brain should know that that's a complete load of bollocks. But again, it fits into this weird thing of anything negative must be true. Now the problem with all this is then magnified by the fact that, you know, in the West, in the US or the UK, for example, these are the two countries I'm going to keep using as my examples, there are a lot of people who don't really know anything, but live under this belief that they absolutely do. So when you see something like, you know, that when it was like the wet market thing, ban the wet markets. Now people saying ban the wet markets probably never been to a wet market and probably haven't even heard these two words, wet and market, put together before, but suddenly they're experts on it. This is a big problem, of course. Now I've lived in China for a really big part of my adult life, and I've always had an interest in it since I was a kid, to be honest. And I would never in a million years say that I fully understand this culture or this place. It's kind of difficult to comprehend, to be honest. I think that's probably why I like it, and I do try to keep learning more every year. But yeah, there are people out there who think they know. And why do they know? Well, they know better than people here because they think everyone here is brainwashed. That pejorative term we use to describe anyone from any country who lives under a different system than our own. Now I can't think of many things that are more horrible than labelling basically an entire nation of people as basically not knowing anything or just they're blindly led. It is something that I think with, you know, in like a democratic nation with free press and free speech and all this kind of things that we value highly. Again, it somehow gives us the right to say that about people. It's really belittling, obviously. It's a horrible thing to say. And obviously it makes us immune to it, you know? We have all this freedom, we can't possibly be brainwashed. Well, there you go. I think this is a pretty grim thing. Obviously, I mean, for anyone who's never been to China or knows nothing about China, to suddenly think that they know what's going on here better than, you know, the 1.4 billion Chinese people who live here, that is ridiculously arrogant. It's a big problem. So I was mostly very positive about how things were handled here during the coronavirus pandemic, and I think, as I said in my videos that I was making at the time, and things are pretty good here now, as you can see. But the thing is, you know, I remember when we went to lockdown back in January. Goodness me, January, it's July, almost July now, right? You know, again, the language that was coming out of the papers and the government back home, the regime, you know, using its draconian measures, locking us up, guns to our heads, and all this kind of stuff. And it's and then the app came. Well, we got an app, more control over the people. And if they were actually paying attention and not just trying to, like, you know, score political points and things, they might have actually got ahead of this thing a bit quicker, because, you know, the UK is clearly going to have a second wave, unfortunately, because they've just relaxed all the restrictions, which they shouldn't have. And the US obviously is already going through a big upturn again. Anyway, I'm not going to waffle on too much. It's just something that's bugged me this year, especially living here and seeing how things were handled here, which again, in my opinion, were incredibly well given the circumstances. I think people need to learn more about China and not just listen to the stupid newspapers and idiots on Twitter, one in particular. Yeah, maybe people just need to understand it a bit more. It's a country that's, you know, it's got this crazy long history and culture. It's the most populous country in the world, one of the biggest countries in the world, and truly I think that a lot of people just don't really know much about it. Why is that? Like, you know, when I think about when I was in school, this might have changed now, obviously. When I was in school, it was quite a while ago. We didn't learn anything about China. We didn't learn anything about China. I learned about the Aztecs. I could name, you know, most people in my generation could probably name a few Aztec kings. not the most, it's interesting history, but not the most useful history on the grand scheme of things. I wonder how many people of my generation could name even like one emperor of China. Probably, maybe not many, because we just don't learn anything about it. Why is that? To keep us in the dark? Because, you know, if we don't know something, if we have a very limited knowledge about something, it's very easy to make that into something dark, or the enemy. That's a bit of a conspiracy theory, sorry. But either way, I would just say, you know, people need to come here really when it's open again and have a look, because it's a great place. It's not perfect, no question about that, but nowhere is. It is, after all, a country full of people, run by people, so therefore of course there are problems here, but you know, it's a wonderful place. And I think the way it is portrayed back home, not by all media, not by all people, of course, I know there are a lot of people and who actually do know what it's like. I think the way it's portrayed by the right wing certainly, is really despicable, because, you know, they're using it as a political tool, basically, to garner support for themselves. And yeah, it's something that I can't understand. It makes me sick, to be honest. So I guess the reason that I wanted to make this video, and why I feel quite passionately about it, is because I live here, and a lot of my friends are Chinese, and I think this constant blah against China is such a drag on people, you know, like, it's really unfair. People here just, like, you know, of course people here are just people, shockingly, you know, with families and jobs and lives and things like that. But it's this kind of like demonization of the country which is going on at the moment, particularly from the States, of course, particularly from the States and Trump. It's very unfair. And I think I don't want to tell you you're wrong and believe me, of course, but I would hope people would actually question it a little bit more and not just take everything at face value of whatever you read on the front of the Daily Mail or whatever Fox News tells you. And actually maybe just use a bit more judgment and actually think about it more, and like, is this can it possibly be like that? And I hope that my videos can show a little bit more of China. Like I say, I am going on my travels in a few days for a month at least, secret location, but it's going to be great, and I think it's going to show hopefully a very different part of China that I think you'll enjoy. So I'm going to say goodbye there, and it's been a bit of a ramble. As you can see, this bothers me, this topic, but I'll be back to travel videos very soon, and I'm very excited about it. Okay, so until next time, guys, if you haven't subscribed already, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you later. Take care. Bye bye.